August 1971. In the basement of a university building, a group of ordinary college students step into an experiment. They are told it will last 2 weeks. They will be divided into 2 roles: prisoners and guards. It is supposed to be controlled, safe, temporary. But within hours, something begins to change. The guards start enforcing rules. The prisoners begin to obey. Then the rules become stricter. The punishments become harsher. And the behavior becomes real. Sleep is taken away. Freedom is restricted. Identity is stripped. And what started as a simulation begins to feel like a real prison. By the 2nd day, participants are breaking down. By the 4th day, the situation is spiraling out of control. And by the 6th day, the experiment is shut down. Not because it was complete, but because it had become too dangerous to continue. This is the story of how a simple experiment revealed something deeply unsettling about human behavior. The experiment was designed by psychologist Philip Zimbardo at Stanford University. The goal seems straightforward: to study how people behave when placed in positions of power and submission. Do people become aggressive because of their personality, or because of the roles they are given? To find out, volunteers were recruited. They were screened for mental and physical health. All were considered stable, ordinary, no history of violence, no signs of psychological instability. They were randomly assigned roles: guards or prisoners. None of them knew how quickly those roles would take over. The prison was built inside a university basement. It had cells, bars, isolation areas, everything designed to feel real. The prisoners were arrested at their homes, handcuffed, searched, brought in by real police. From the very beginning, their identities were stripped. They were no longer called by their names, only by numbers. They wore uniforms. They were constantly monitored. Meanwhile, the guards were given authority: uniforms, whistles, sunglasses to hide their eyes. They were told to maintain order, but they were not given strict rules on how to do it. And that freedom would change everything. On the 1st day, everything seemed under control. But by the 2nd day, the prisoners began to resist. They refused orders. They challenged authority. And the guards responded, not with violence at first, but with control. They removed privileges, forced prisoners to do repetitive tasks, used psychological pressure. Then it escalated. Sleep was disrupted. Punishments became more intense. Some prisoners were placed in isolation. Others were humiliated. And something disturbing became clear. The guards were no longer acting. They were becoming their roles. As days passed, the situation worsened. Prisoners showed signs of emotional distress: crying, anxiety, withdrawal. Some broke down completely. But what shocked researchers most was the behavior of the guards. They were not forced to act this way. They were not instructed to be cruel. Yet many became increasingly aggressive. They created new punishments. They enforced arbitrary rules. And they began to enjoy the control. The experiment had crossed a line. But it didn't stop. By the 4th day, the experiment was spiraling. One prisoner had already been released due to emotional breakdown. Others showed clear signs of psychological stress. Yet the experiment continued. Even the researchers began to lose objectivity. They were no longer just observing. They were participating. And then came the turning point. A psychologist visiting the experiment saw what was happening. She questioned it, challenged it, and forced a realization. This was no longer an experiment. It was harm. After just 6 days, the experiment was terminated. Originally planned for 2 weeks, it ended early. Not because the study was complete, but because it had gone too far. Participants were released. The roles ended, but the effects remained. For many, the experience was deeply disturbing, because it revealed something unexpected. Ordinary people could change very quickly. The experiment became one of the most famous in psychology. It suggested that behavior is not just about personality. It's about situation, environment, power, and roles. Give someone authority, and they may begin to abuse it. Take away someone's identity, and they may lose themselves. But the experiment also raised ethical questions. Should it have been allowed to continue that long? Should it have happened at all? Today, strict ethical standards exist for psychological research, partly because of what happened in that basement. The Stanford prison experiment lasted only 6 days, but its impact lasted decades. not because of what it proved, but because of what it revealed, that under certain conditions, the line between control and cruelty can disappear, between authority and abuse, between who we are and who we become.